Hey there, Vinny from Project Frugal. I've had this shirt for 30 odd years. Someone said to me the other day, you still got that shirt? Yeah, I still got that shirt. Maybe it's because I'm frugal and cheap. Wales, Wales. And ever since I've had this shirt, Wales have been losing at the rugby. Yeah, going downhill, and it's probably all my fault for wearing this shirt. Which is the big reason why I support the All Blacks. All Blacks. All Blacks. Anyway, this video is not about the rivalry between Welsh and New Zealand rugby. It's about Australians and New Zealanders and how much it costs to live. So let's get started and check it out. Thanks for sticking around. 20 odd years ago was the last time I was in Australia. Well, actually, it was the first and last time I was in Australia. Went to watch the Warriors get squarely beaten by Penrith, 36 points to 6. Manu Vatuvei scored the first try, and that was pretty much the highlights, all over and done with. Anyway, went to Bondi Beach, got some fish and chups, one scup of chups and one fish. Got a quizzical look from the person behind the counter, and as soon as I'd said one fish and one chips, they understood exactly what I meant. Apart from Australians having a poor grasp of the English language, no offence if you're Australian, well actually, let's change that. Yes, there's total offence if you are Australian. However, your fish and chips are rubbish, let's face it. And I won't even go into the pies. Having said that, a lot of New Zealanders like to emigrate over to Australia because there's lots of opportunities, or so they say, so let's compare some of the differences. And on my one trip to Sydney, I got some fish and chips at Bondi Beach. I thought they're pretty expensive. I thought everything in Sydney was pretty expensive. And remember, this is going back 20 odd years, or almost 20 years. Let's have a look here. Small chips, ooh, $6. Well, scoop of chips, $6. It's a pretty meager looking scoop of chips. But all products come with salt. Whoa, you got chicken salt or no salt. There's your choices. Fantastic. And for a piece of fish, $10. What? Remember, this is in Australian dollars, so $1 New Zealand dollar will buy you approximately 91 cents Australian. $1 Australian dollar will buy you approximately $1.10 New Zealand. And let's face it, it's not even good fish, it's New Zealand hoki. Ugh. Right off the bat, this is just some random fish and chip shop in Sydney. Yeah, pretty expensive. $10 for a fish, $6 for a small portion of chips. If you're paying more than $5, maybe $6 at an extreme stretch in New Zealand, you're getting ripped off. Anyway, I digress. Let's move on. So the winner in this scenario is New Zealand. We'll tally up the numbers at the end of the video. These numbers and comparisons on this video are not completely factual. Well, they're as factual as I'm going to get it. Take it with a grain of salt, or in this case, chicken salt, or maybe no salt. It's up to you. The next thing we'll look at is cars, transport, petrol, all that sort of thing. Well, we'll forget the transport. We'll just look at cars, see how much you're going to be paying. And for the car category, I tried to go for a 2008 Nissan Note. Doubles as a micro camper. If you haven't seen the video, go and check it out up here. Anyway, we couldn't find one of those, so we're going with a 2008 Suzuki Swift. Over in Australia, you'd be expecting to pay roughly around 7,000 Australian dollars. And in New Zealand, looking at Trade Me, we just have a look at the highest price for a 2008 Suzuki Swift. What do we got here? 6,000 New Zealand dollars, a lot cheaper than Australia. Now, one thing to consider with Australia versus New Zealand, registrations roughly around $800 per year, depending on what state you're in, of course, over in Aussie. However, in New Zealand, it's probably around about maybe $120 odd dollars, something like that. A lot more expensive in Australia, so the car prices are more expensive, the registrations are more expensive. However, the petrol is a lot cheaper. In New Zealand, expect to pay roughly around $2.50 per litre. In Australia, maybe $1.80 Australian for the same litre of petrol. Putting that all into account, the winner of this particular category for cars, or we'll just call it transport, is, drumroll please, New Zealand. And that's New Zealand 2, Australia no. The next category we're going to look at is incomes. Now this is pretty crucial really, probably the most crucial out of the whole lot. Anyway, how much can you expect to earn in Australia? Well, the average, according to the statistics that I've been able to find, well, $100,000 Australian per year. And in New Zealand, the average salary, $65,000. So a huge win there to Australia. In terms of the median, so you've got half of the people above that figure and half below. The figures are roughly around 67,000 for Australia, 65,000 for New Zealand as well. Yeah, it's definitely better to live in Australia in terms of income. So we're going to give 2 points to Australia for this one. The scores now, New Zealand 2, Australia 2.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice.
Let's go and do some food cost comparisons for some regular goods in New Zealand and Australia. We've gone with some standard sort of items here. I just picked them randomly just to check out what we had. The New Zealand supermarket in this instance is Pick and Save. The Australian one is called Coles. They also have Aldi, which is a bit cheaper from what I've seen. However, we're just going to go with Coles for this. Milk, definitely a little bit cheaper in Australia. Well, if we have a look, adjusted to New Zealand dollars, well, actually it's 1 cent cheaper in New Zealand. Loaf of bread. Going down these regular items, what do we got? We got milk, bread, butter, peas, chicken breast, beef mince, potato, carrots, bananas and apples. Yeah, I'm going to feast on that. We're going to have a roast chicken breast dinner with bread and butter and peas. Okay. And some potatoes. Yep, that'll be all right. New Zealand, $53.21. Adjusted to New Zealand dollars for the Australian products, $51.36. So very slightly cheaper for these items in Australia compared with New Zealand. We've got to give Australia another tick.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice.
Seeing that it's summer, who wouldn't like a nice ice-cold beer? Well, you're going to be paying through the nose. If you live in Australia, you're going to be paying probably around 20 to 30% more for a bottle of beer than you will in New Zealand. So this one goes to New Zealand. That's a tick for them. Yeah, nice. 3-3. Let's carry on. And before we do move on, we just got this B-roll clip of some people drinking beer. And unfortunately, the woman down the front, she's actually drinking wine. Wine is revolting in my humble opinion. I'd rather drink puddle water, but yeah, I digress. Speaking of taxes, which we weren't speaking about to begin with, we're going to go and have a look at some taxes. What do we got here? New Zealand tax rates, 10.5% for the first up to $14,000 that you earn. Yeah, you're going to be paying this much. We got some theoretical income amounts here. We got 50 grand. 80 grand, 100 grand, 150, 200 and 250 if you're really fortunate and you're a CEO of some company. However, most people aren't. If we went back to the $50,000 to $80,000 mark, which is probably what most people are in, at least in New Zealand, and maybe up to the $100,000 mark, that's kind of realistic. You'll be paying less money if you're on a lower income in Australia than you will be in New Zealand. But when the money reaches a certain point, you'll actually be paying more in tax in Australia. And if we have a look down here, what do we got here? Yeah, not many people earn over 150,000, but if you are earning pretty much around 150, 160,000 over in Australia, you'll be paying more tax than you would be in New Zealand.
Tiny kangaroo down, score, tiny kangaroo down.
So after going through the taxes, it looks like Australia is the marginal favourite there. Australia 4, New Zealand 3. I think that's right. I'm starting to lose count now.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice.
What about superannuation, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked, because in Australia, you get 12%. Whoa, that's pretty impressive. I think it's 10%, maybe 11%. It's going up to 12%. That's pretty much all I know. The employer pays, so the money's got to come from somewhere at the end of the day. New Zealand, well, it only offers a paltry 3% if you're lucky. Generally speaking, then that's for KiwiSaver. So Australia, once again, the clear winner. I think we're now up to Australia 5, New Zealand 3.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice.
However, there is a caveat. The retirement age in Australia is 67, and it's also means tested and asset tested. Oh, that's not so good. Whereas in New Zealand, once you hit 65, you get the pension. Doesn't matter if you earn $4 trillion a year or $5 a year. You get the New Zealand pension. So we're going to give a couple of points here to New Zealand. I think it's roughly around 5-all. Let's carry on. Let's talk about everyone's favourite topic, Capital gains tax. Woohoo! And I know they're trying to push this in New Zealand at the moment. Who's trying to push it? Well, the government's trying to push it. And the left-wing socialists are trying to push it because they don't want the rich to have any money. They want to take the money from the rich and give it to the poor. And the problem with New Zealand is there's too many Robin Hoods wanting to steal the money off the rich to give to the poor. Okay, that's a generalisation. It's not necessarily true, but you get the idea. Capital gains tax in Australia, if you've held an asset for over a year, then you get a 50% reduction if you're selling or disposing of the asset. Now, I'm not sure what the assets entail, but they don't include the family home. But if you've got a rental property, anything like that, you're going to be liable for capital gains tax. Yeah. And it's all pretty much based on your personal tax rate. Yeah. So you're going to be paying more money. New Zealand doesn't have a capital gains tax, so it's a win there to New Zealand. So New Zealand 6, Australia 5. Let's have a quick talk about stamp duty. So in Australia, it's known as transfer duty, a tax imposed by state and territory governments on certain transactions. That sounds great. Who doesn't want to pay more money to the government? It is mostly commonly associated with the purchase of real estate, but can also apply to other transfers of assets such as motor vehicles and certain business transactions. Ooh, nice. And each state and territory in Australia sets its own rates and rules for stamp duty. Yep, that's cool. So let's go and have a look down here. So if you're purchasing a property in Victoria valued at Australian $800,000, a stamp duty might be calculated as a flat rate plus a percentage of the property value over a certain threshold, for example, using an approximate rate. $31,000 on top of your purchase price. That doesn't sound like a win. So your $800,000 house is now costing you $830,000. Ooh. And talking about house prices, they're pretty much the same across New Zealand and Australia, give or take, roughly around the $1 million mark in terms of the average house price. What a rip-off. So, moving on, another clear winner in this is probably going to be... Yep, that's right, it's New Zealand. I've lost count of what the totals are. I'll tell you at the end of the video. And what about the weather? Well, we all know that the weather in Australia is a lot hotter. If you like getting toasted in a toaster oven, Australia is the place for you. And if you like getting drowned and drenched by torrential rain all the time, New Zealand is definitely the place for you. So in this scenario, I think we're going to give the win to Australia.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice.
Speaking of things that want to eat you, over in Australia you got crocs, you got snakes, you got cane toads, you got big hairy spiders. Yeah, lots of things out there to kill you, whereas in New Zealand all you got really is the caterpillar spider and a bunch of wokesters. So I think we'll give the win here, maybe marginally, well, no. If we got the wokesters, it's going to be a tie.
Time the kangaroo down, score. Time the kangaroo down.
And what about crime? Well, there's slightly more crime in Australia versus New Zealand from what I've seen, but it's pretty marginal. Both countries are riddled with crime. So in this scenario, the winner of the crime category is... That's right, it's South Africa. Haha! Bet you didn't see that coming. And we'll just do one final comparison. We're going off to Numbeo. We're comparing Sydney and Auckland. Let's change it round. Let's go Auckland and Sydney. Let's click on that button. Okay, so the cost of living in Sydney, 13.6% higher than in Auckland without rent. Cost of living including rent in Sydney, 25.6% higher than in Auckland. So it looks like things are more expensive in Australia. Well, if we're looking at Sydney at least. Local purchasing power in Sydney is 4.4% higher. So they've got more money, but things cost a lot more as well. We've got some comparisons here for just regular food items. You can see here we talked about the imported beer. Well, according to this, 10.3%. Let's get rid of this horrible blurb that's come down on the screen here. Got some food prices. It's a bit of a mixed bag there. Looks like some things are more expensive in Auckland. Looking at this, anything with a plus amount, a positive amount over on this side is more expensive in Sydney. Looking at that, for example, the inexpensive restaurant, $25 in Auckland, $27.57 if compared to New Zealand currency over in Sydney. More expensive, some things are cheaper. Eggs are cheaper in Australia according to this. And you've got a lot of people commenting on that. Well, taxis, you don't want to get a taxi in Sydney, that's for sure, looking at this. What else have we got here? We got basic utilities. Mobile phones are cheaper in Australia. Yeah, fitness club. Expensive. And really, the big one here, buy an apartment, you're looking at, I'm presuming this, per square metre. Auckland is 13,000 New Zealand dollars per square metre. Sydney, $24,000 per square metre. Whoa! Plus 75% outside of the city centre. Well, presumably it's outside Sydney, maybe in the suburbs. 26% more expensive. So a lot of money for housing over in Aussie. So, we've tallied up the numbers. No, we haven't. Who's the big winner? Well, yes, we have. Yeah, we've tallied up the numbers. Who's the big winner in this Australia versus New Zealand versus Australia battle for the cost of living? Which country would you rather live in? Well, here's the answer. Drum roll, please. And yes, it's Portugal. Yay, we're all moving out of Australia, out of New Zealand. We're moving to Portugal. It's sunny all year round, pretty much. Might be a little bit cold in the middle of winter, but that's where we're going. Yeehaw! And there we have it. That about wraps it up for another amazing video for Project Frugal. Whether you want to live in Australia or you want to live in New Zealand, incomes are higher in Australia, expenses are higher as well from what we've seen. It doesn't really matter either one way or the other. That's why we're off to Portugal. Right, we'll catch you later. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and we'll see you in the next video. Catch ya.